Welcome to Logical-NDE. My name is Emily, and it is my pleasure to narrate the near-death experiences of those who have seen the other side. If you are new to our channel, welcome. For our regular viewers, please sit back and enjoy today's episode.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bill Letson. I'm a retired fireman. I live on the Central Coast of California. And in 1994, I had a near-death experience. It was on-duty related. And I'll tell that in a second here. And I just want to thank um, Logical-NDE for this channel and having me on it. So the story begins in 1994. I was working as a fireman and engineer on a fire engine in the Santa Barbara area. And I was a driver, and we had 4 on the engine, I think, and 1 was a paramedic. And there was a very strong flu epidemic that was in the Santa Barbara area, Santa Barbara County area. And a lot of people were sick. A lot of emergency rooms were inundated with people suffering. And one of these, we went on a call, and one of these was a woman who was, she was in bed and she was having a lot of trouble. And we jumped into action right away. It looked very serious. And I climbed across the bed to get a mask on her, an O2 mask. And when I was kind of getting it hooked up, she exhaled into my face, and I inhaled all of that. And I knew right away. I looked at the medic, and I'm like, this is not going to end well for me. And a few days later, I was really ill, and I got what she got. And but for her, we got her fixed up, got her to the hospital, and she recovered and is doing fine to this day, I believe. But with me, it was a couple days later, I was super ill. I was super dehydrated really quickly. I was throwing up. I couldn't keep anything down. I couldn't get anything in, and it was going the other way. And I was just running out of fluids. And about the 3rd day, mid-morning, the 3rd day, I was super ill. And I remember I got up to go to the restroom. I looked in the mirror and I didn't even recognize myself. I was super gaunt and dark and looked like I was in a lot of trouble. And I tried to take my pulse at my wrist, and I couldn't get a pulse. And that's when I knew, okay, this is serious. You're not going to be upright and conscious much longer. So I got to a phone, called my family, called my sister, and my 5-year-old niece picked up, and she said, like, all I could do was, it was like a whisper. I couldn't really even talk, but she recognized it was me, and they hung up, called 911, and Santa Barbara County Fire came, and the guys did a wonderful job. They got me into an ambulance. They got fluids in me, got me on my way to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital in the Santa Maria area, it was filled with people who had the same symptoms. Everybody was severely ill. And they got me into a room, and my wife showed up, and she was at work, and some of the fire guys hung around for a while, and they gave me a few IVs, a few bags, and I was feeling a lot better. And I'm like, I think I can go home and we can start some kind of medication or something. And the nurse came in and she said, everybody in here is getting the same thing, and these are doctor's orders. And it was something for pain, a morphine-based thing for pain, and something for nausea. And I said, I'm not having any of these problems. And she's like, orders are orders. So I said, okay, fine, whatever. And she pushed it in the IV port, and she was in a hurry, and uh, I don't have any ill feelings about any of that because of well, the result was just this amazing thing that happened to me. So yeah, she pushed it all the way in, and it just hit me. My system. I came in there on my knees, health wise, and that just floored me. Um, because the opiates vasodilate your circulatory system. They just open the vessels up really wide, and I I I I didn't really have any very many much fluids left, and you just open the system up, and then everything just tanked, and my eyes rolled back, and I fell back on the bed. My wife said it was crazy. He dropped like a stone, and everybody got kind of pretty excited, and I don't remember anything. I was out cold for the rest of the story till I wake up the next morning. And my wife said they came in immediately. She got out a pencil and paper and started writing things down. And she said they gave you Narcan right away. Um, and then 5 minutes later, they did it again. And then there was another dose sometime after that, 10 or 15 minutes. And they got a couple of IVs going in you, and you had your head down to get your blood up to your brain, and shipped you up to intensive care. And I spent the night there. And they told me the next morning that I had 11 IV bags had gone into me over the night. So they were rehydrating the balloon, my body, and floating the system, and I survived it. But sometime during that night, my spirit didn't think it was going to be surviving it. And, when this body gets stressed to that point, the spirit will fly. And sometime 2 or 3 in the morning or something like that, I had left my body, and I was flying through this star-filled realm. That's all I could call them forever was stars. They were these multicolored stars that were alive, and the emotions coming from them were just a welcoming and a joyous reunion. And I was parading through them, and they were so happy. And I was overjoyed. I was exuberant. I was euphoric. I didn't know a person could feel that good. And I was flying along. I was this expanded cloud of some kind, like a giant balloon. And I felt like I'd been let out of a hot, dark, stuffy closet that I'd been stuffed into. And I was back to who I really was. I was back home. And and the it was just this incredible level of bliss. And it felt like some sort of cosmic orgasm. It was throughout your whole body, and your body was this huge expanded cloud, and everything was perfect. And the French call the human orgasm, they call it la petite mort. They call it the little death. And that absolutely fits, because what I was experiencing was 100 times more amazing than anything we experience here. So I'm flying along, and I'm being welcomed by all these stars, these orbs, these beings, and feeling fantastic. There were no questions in my head as far as questions about science or math or anything. It was just, it was all there. And the only question that was going through my head was, how in the world did I forget who I really was? How was it possible that I believed I was this dude, this guy, this Bill Letson, this guy you're talking to? because I wasn't him anymore. He's a great guy, and I've had a wonderful life even up to that point. But I was 38 at the time, and charging through life, had everything. Um, but I wasn't that guy, and I was absolutely thrilled to be free of the situation. Um, yeah, and I kept how it was so crazy that I was convinced I was this person and that I had all of this story, this history, and these emotions, and these family relationships, and I had aspirations, and I had all this stuff, and none of it was real. It was a complete illusion. It was a game that we play when we come into these lives, and it's like we're on a stage and or in a movie, and we play this part for a while, and then we go home to where everything is perfect. And you it takes a little while probably to reacquaint with that place, but I knew that I was home. So I'm flying along and I'm thinking, man, I can do this forever. And this is perfect. This is everything that anybody is ever missing in their life is immediately fulfilled. All the emotions of belonging and being loved and all of that, it was overwhelming. So I'm flying along thinking this is awesome. And all of a sudden, I landed somewhere. I landed in a place that was solid. There was indirect lighting, and there was equipment around me, and there were tables and beds, things like that. It was like I was in like a medical clinic or something, or some sort of facility. And right in front of me were these three short little hooded guys. They had dark robes, and they had squatty little bodies and um, squatty little faces, and they were overjoyed to see me. They were bouncing around, and they were smiling from ear to ear, and they had bright eyes, and they were thrilled that I was there, and they were giggling. And I was very confused at this situation, and I was kind of looking at them, and they could read me, energetically. I think they can. We all read each other. There's no secrets. And one of them came forward, and he took a good long read, and then he turned to the other two, and he says, "He doesn't remember us." And they all started giggling, laughing uproariously, and bouncing around. And my thought was, I kind of remember you guys, but I'm having some trouble. This is very strange to all of a sudden to be in this place. And then there was this other guy, and he was kind of in the background at first, and he came forward. He was like he was made out of mist or smoke or something. And there's lots of religious paintings and stuff that they show the divine with these flowing robes, and I think that's what this is. This is a energetic being with that had this flow to him. And when he came forward, he had the biggest smile on his face, and he had the sweetest eyes. And when he came forward, it looked like I was looking at somebody underwater, like they would separate as he walked forward. Parts of him would separate. The top would move first, and then the rest would catch up. It was very unusual vision. And as he came really close, my chest just was expanding. It was like it was a tire that was being overpumped. It was going to pop, and my throat was tightening and constricting, and I had this overwhelming feeling that I was going to just fall down and burst into tears, uncontrollable crying from love. There was so much love coming from this being that it was paralyzing. So he came forward and we had talked back and forth, and everything that I had to say, he chuckled. He was just chuckling all the time and laughing, and the little guys were bouncing around, giggling. It was completely um, wonderful um, scenario. And at one point, I said, "Well, there wasn't much going on there. It didn't seem like it was organized. It was just the guys were very playful and joyful, and that was kind of what was going on. And me being having this human thing still going on, I'm like, all right, well, we got to get down to business here. And so I piped up and I said, well, we're going to do a review of my life, and you guys want to get started? Is that what's next? And the big wispy guy, he just cracked up. He started chuckling, and he was very entertained by um, by me. It was like I was a little toddler, and I thought I was in charge somehow. And he just thought that was funny. And but he humored me, and he was like, "Sure, let's do that. How do you want to start?" And I thought it was kind of weird that I'm, kind of mapping out how things are going to go. But things weren't going to. There was just a show and tell. I wasn't staying, and my life wasn't over. And I'm the only one in the room that didn't know that. And so yeah, they were humoring me, and I was getting this experience. I was getting this seed planted, and then it was up to me when I came back. Was I going to talk about it? And um, that if anybody who's paying attention right now to all this NDE stuff, they've been watching it for the last, I don't know, 8 or 10 years, what's gone on in the last year is phenomenal. The channels that have popped up and the people that are coming forward. It used to be there was a few dozen of us, and we talk at the different conferences and things like that. But now there's hundreds of people on these channels now, and the people that are watching these videos are coming forward in the comments, and then you'll see their comments. You'll see them being interviewed on one of these channels, and this is just an exploding thing. And it's just the last 5 or 6 months, the last year, but especially the last 5 or 6 months. Um, I get twice a week. I get calls for these interviews, and some of them are a few hundred views, and it gets into the thousands, and that was normal. I've been doing this for 6 years or so, and that was normal, and that was the level of world interest. But now they're in the millions. These things are getting views, millions of views worldwide, and 10,000 comments. So something's, people are looking for proof that there is a divine order and that we are on these wonderful journeys. It's right there. What's going on in the world right now is, creation is stepping forward and the world is changing. So I talked for a while with the back to the talking to the tall wispy guy and the three little bouncing put it guys. And so I told a few stories, I got into it. I told stories about, my wife and I, we had lots of, as a forest ranger and stuff. we had lots of different jobs, and one of them was offered one summer was offered to go to an island off the coast of California, and we'd be there by ourselves, counting foxes and keeping an eye on the place, living in some little cottage. And people would come out, research groups would come out occasionally, but we would be alone on this island for weeks at a time. And um, she would have loved it. But I took this other job, and I look back at that and I said, I should have done that for her. So I told a few stories, and halfway through, in the middle of one of them, the tall, wispy guy goes, "Okay, that's enough. Time to go back." And I was like, "Go back? Are you kidding me? Um, no way. I'm not going back there." It was such a relief to exit this body, to exit, to step out of the costume and out of the movie and to go home to a wonderful place where there are no low emotions, there are no low vibrations, there are no um, thoughts of jealousy or anger or hatred or anxiety. They don't exist. And that is why nobody wants to come back. Um, but yeah, he says, yeah, you have to go back, and you have things to do. You have important things to do. And like I said before, I think this is what's happening right now. People like me are suddenly being asked to tell our story over and over, and it's just beginning, and it'll be centuries, but the world will slowly uh, climb back to a golden age, a place, a time when heaven on earth reigns here in the physical, and we all know it's possible. It's just not happening, and that's the script. That's the world stage script. And so he says, yeah, you have to go back. You have things to do. And as he came forward, I told him, hey, boss, come on. I can't go back there. You don't understand. It's really terrible. It's really rough. And um, when I first was out of my body and I was flying through this star-filled realm, my first thought was, man, what the heck was that? That was gnarly. And there's nothing about my life has been gnarly. It's been a dream life. But the emotions that we're saddled with, this is, the universe is our emotions, our intentions. And in this physical world, this is where we learn the really low emotions. We learn to navigate these things and find our way back to our divine self. That self that I was sampling there at this place. So as he came forward, the tall wispy guy came forward and says, yeah, you have to go back. And as he got forward, I knew I had complete control over the dimension and everything I was experiencing, including myself. And I felt the frequency drop, and the vibration was lowering. The room started to break up, started to dematerialize, and he just sort of evaporated in front of me, and I dropped away into darkness. And I remember being close to my body and being in a very dark and dismal and lonely place just before I got in my body. And we have names for this, I think, hell or Hades or something like that. And it's directly next to where we are in the physical. And Edgar Cayce is a very famous American mystic. He was a Kentucky farm boy 100 years ago, and he had the ability to leave his body and collect information about people's lives, because it's all, like I said, it's all scripted. And he would come back and give readings for, he was very famous. And he said when he would first leave his body, he was in a lonely, dismal, scary place. And he said it was a place of nightmares. And that's, I think that's what happens when we soul travel at night. We leave our body and we move around. We move through this realm, this valley of the shadow of death. It's right there at the, as we die and we leave our bodies, there is this place that's rough. And that's where I think nightmares are, when we, linger there, or something, we have an experience there or something like that. And he said he would move into this giant stairway, and he would circular stairway, Jacob's ladder, and he would climb this ladder and he would see these little elf guys, these little hooded guys. They had dark robes at the lower levels, and they were light robes as they went up. And there was 8 layers or something like that, 8 levels. And he would travel on in this place. And it was, like I said, it was very scary and lonely in that lower level. And then he would move to the next level, and he'd see people with very distorted body parts and stuff like that. And then when he moved higher, things started becoming normal. So yeah, that's a little story. What I think is that, as we live our many, many lives, we learn to not be fearful in that valley of the shadow of death. It's up to us to navigate that area without fear, because we have realized who we really are, that we are these divine beings and nothing can harm us. We are eternal and infinite. So getting back to my story, I so I was right next to my body, and I felt this place was not a fun place. Then I was back in my body, and some time went by, and at one point, I was in intensive care, and they had all these tubes and stuff, monitors hooked up to me, and this automatic blood pressure machine would squeeze my arm, and it'd take the blood pressure every 10 or 15 minutes or so. And that would wake me up, I'm pretty sure, because it hurts. And I could see the readout in the dark, and I could see the numbers, and they were in the 40s at first. And then I kept getting woke up every cycle or whatever, and I'd see that it was climbing. And it would be in the 50s and the 60s, and somewhere in the 60s and 70s, I could stay conscious for more than, a few seconds. And I was, in my estimation, I was coming back. I was going to survive. And I started, looking around and sitting up and looking around, and a nurse walked by, and she was very startled. And she said, "My goodness, you're awake." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Well, I have to go tell the doctor. We've been very worried about you. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know where this was going. And well, thank goodness you're back." And I'm like, "Well, okay, you can tell the doctor. But first of all, what am I doing back here?" I was so sad. It was just this crushing sadness. And I said, "Well, how did I get back here? I was home. I was home with my best friends, and I was convinced that I had bought the farm. And, that Bill was dead. And now that sounds pretty brutal, but it wasn't. It wasn't. sort of slipped out of this physical illusion, and I'd gone home, and from my perspective, I was still me. Still the voice in my head, everything about me was still me, but all of the parts of this human life had been a part I was playing, a joke, a game. Um, so, I told her, I said, I was convinced I had bought the farm. I go, what has happened? And she's, nurses. She's like, honey, you were in escrow. You've been in escrow, but you fell out of escrow and now you're back with us. So you need to get your head around that. And that stayed with me. That was the first conversation I had with a human being. And the sadness was overwhelming. I can see why a lot of people, you hear stories where they were so sad they slipped into addiction and depression and things like that. And it's absolutely understandable. But with her, what she was telling me is what the yogis and the spiritual teachers and things like that, they say the same thing. They say after an experience like that, yes, it's earth-shattering and all that, but you're still here. You've got this mission, this life. It's not an accident. You, there are thousands of souls watching all of us, um, hoping for the best, helping us make decisions, pushing us in directions to where we have the experiences we signed up for. So what the yogis will tell you is that after an experience like that, and you're back here to get yourself together, pull it together, and pick yourself up, and every day chop wood and carry water, which means get back in your life and do the things that your life needs from you so that you can continue on your mission, this wonderful gift, this wonderful amusement park ride. So that was good. And she went and got the doctor, back in the hospital now. She went and got the doctor, and he came, and I told him my story, and he was like, "Oh, you're crazy." And I told my wife, my parents were there. They went and got them, and I told everyone this story, and I sounded like a crazy person. Uh, and it took a few days to recover, and when I got back in the department, back on duty, um, guys would approach me, and they're like, "Hey, we heard you had this wild thing happen, man. What happened?" And I tell the story exactly as I just told it every time. And um, you know, after a while, I started. One guy told me, he said, the guys up at the higher ranks are starting to talk about you. And because I sounded like a crazy person. And so I learned to zip it, to dummy up. And I dummied up for about 15 years. And in 2010, I retired. And in that 15 years, if anybody wanted to talk to me, I always talk to them. If they'd lost somebody they loved, and I would say, we've never lost anybody. We've never lost any of our family. We've never lost our pets. We don't even lose ourselves when we die. We just leave the physical and we go home. And it is a joyous homecoming for everyone. And they're all there waiting for you. That was that when I was parading through, that was my ancestors. They were all very proud, and it was a wonderful reunion. Um, so yeah, those things are important. Family is important. Just just know that I've come to conclusions on my own, and no matter what, we've got problems in our family, and no matter what happens, I always let them know that I love them and that they're, very special. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps with some relationships because they can get really toxic, and the universe is only concerned with emotions. That is what the universe is: our emotions, our intentions, our plans for the future, our thoughts. So yeah, I always anytime anybody asked, I always told them exactly what I experienced. And um, there was a number of religious guys that wanted to hear this story, and you could tell they weren't comfortable with it because it didn't match um, whatever doctrine or dogma their religion said about what the hereafter is. But anytime they asked me this or they wanted to, one of the things was I said, well, I already talked about that valley of the shadow of death. Um, that our ultimate goal is to navigate that area, that to die well, as Michael Tamara puts it, and to keep our wits about ourselves, and to not fear the things that we see. This is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Um, there are a lot of spooky, fearful looking things in that area, and to just know that these don't affect you, and to not react to them. Another story is, I met the three hooded little bouncy guys, and then the tall wispy guy, and there's this talk about the apocalypse and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And I don't think the world comes to an end with this apocalyptic um, stories or whatever. I think it's your own personal end. And you meet these, I met four guys, and you meet these four individuals as you cross over. So there, almost everything that I've experienced, you can tie it into how some sort of religion or um, some sort of human has put a turn on it or put a spin on it. And so, yeah. And so I talked to anybody, and uh, anybody who wanted to hear about my story, I always spoke about it, but didn't, I wasn't as excited to let everyone know because it's a story that didn't fit. And now it's starting to fit. It's just beginning, but it'll be a world, I think it's going to be a world um, changing thing to where we realize what we really are as we climb back to a golden age. And slowly over time, more and more of the world will awaken to this. So, okay, in 2010, I retired, and this um, desire to look at what happened during my near-death experience, it sort of came roaring back. It wasn't anything I was intentionally doing, but I found myself in Costa Rica often, staying for weeks and months at a time, being around shamans, being around um, the ways of the Red Road, the indigenous people, Native Americans, South, Central, North American natives. And what I found out is the things that they understood about this life were actually what the ancients understood. If you look into the Egyptians and the Mayans, and going back to even Atlantis, um, the shamanic cultures, the Native American cultures, they have this information in them. It's told different ways, it's explained different ways, but it's the same information, and it fits with what I experienced as leaving this body, leaving this self behind. So in 2010, I was hanging around shamans, and I was hanging around indigenous people and people who lived like indigenous people, taking up their ways and living in nature and silence and stillness. And when you do that, you do that long enough and you're serious about it. And I wasn't trying to get anywhere. I was just, I don't know, I was being led. And anyway, something opens. And now it was very remarkable when it happened, but now when I look in the blue sky, it's like it's all glitter, like I'm in a snow globe of uh, glitter everywhere. Um, this is a conscious universe that is orchestrating our stay here on this stage in the movie. Um, Souls are around all of us, hundreds of them, thousands of them are following us, all of us. We're all very important. And when I look at around people, it used to take a while, but it only takes a short time now, seconds. But you can see energy around everyone. You can see you can see energy around them, auras. And sometimes if I look at a person and really let go, their faces change. Other faces come up. They'll stay a few seconds and then they'll disappear. Another face will come up. It's like turning the pages of a book. And these aren't just still photographs. These are animated living beings that we all are. We've all had these thousands of lives, and they're all a part of us. The information is stored on the soul, and everybody can do it. Everybody can see this with this eye gazing thing. You can start to scratch the surface. So I started talking about all of this in around 2016, and getting invited to conferences and things like that, talking to weirdo crowds. And the researchers that made sense to me, people like Graham Hancock and others like him, they all said, I noticed, they all said the same thing. They said that if you want to know what's going on in the universe, what the universe is really about, talk to the near-death experiencers first, and then talk to the shamans, the healing ceremonies, shamanic ceremonies, shamanic culture, and then talk to the people who sit and quietly. The word meditate comes up, but I've never been taught anything about meditation. I just know to sit quietly in nature and to sort of let go of this place. And that's what that's what I've said in every time I've given an interview. That's what I've said, is that if you want to really find out what's going on, talk to the near-death experiencer and talk to the shamanic culture and get with these people who can calm themselves to a point where the vibrations start. The vibrations in the center of the forehead, and you start to transcend this place. You can move out of your body. Okay. And all of this, what the near-death experiencer and the shamans and the really deep meditators, to where they start with the vibrations through their whole body. What all of this is talking about, what it's all pointing to is the pineal gland. We all have this. It's called the third eye. But the pineal gland sits between our eyes and the middle of our forehead. It's deep in the skull, and like our eyes, it's a small gland and it's hollow and it's filled with water. It's filled with light infused, electrically charged water. And inside that hollowness, there are rods and cones, just like in our two eyeballs that see in the physical world. And the pineal gland sees into the energetic world. And the pineal gland, it's hardwired directly into the visual cortex of the human brain. So that when a person says, this other place opens up like a movie screen. I mean, it opens up like a screen in front of you and you're looking right at it. And that makes sense because the visual cortex is displaying the information that the pineal gland is seeing in looking through that water. Water is some sort of a divine being that transcends the dimensions. It's getting pretty far along, but so yeah, I've said, and every time I've given a talk, I've said the same thing, that if you really want to get to the bottom of this, talk to the near-death experiencer, the shamanic knowledge, and the deep meditator. And another key function of the pineal gland is that it produces DMT naturally. We produce DMT, dimethyltryptamine, in our bodies naturally. And something I've noticed from all these videos that are going up in the comments, it's like every fifth comment or so, somebody says something like, if in relation to my near-death experience, some guy will write, oh, well, somebody slipped this guy some DMT while he was in the hospital. Somebody put DMT in his IV. And because his story sounds like a DMT trip. Well, yeah. Nobody slipped me any DMT. I had a near-death experience, and DMT is released at the time of our death. It splashes the brain with this chemical that we produce, and it rockets the soul out of the body. And it's active all the time. And when we sleep, it drops a little bit on the brain, and we leave our bodies and we soul travel. And this is some of our dreams, our experiences. We are out of our bodies, moving in the universe. But at the time of death, it splashes the brain with this natural DMT that every living thing produces. And that DMT, that very powerful chemical, rockets the soul out of the body. And this is what the near-death experience is all about. So nobody slipped me DMT. It naturally came. It naturally was released during my near-death experience, and this ties this thing together with this what the experts say about the near-death experiencer and the shamanic cultures and the deep meditator. This all comes back to the pineal gland, which is called seat of the soul. And that pineal gland releases dimethyltryptamine into the brain, and you have an experience outside of this physical realm, this physical dimension. Happens to everybody when they're ready. And if this is something that interests you, this is the whole point of Dr. Rick Strassman's book and his clinical study at the University of New Mexico, where he infused 70 volunteers with DMT in an IV. And these people, and this is what changed my life, is this book, because around that time, 2010, 2012, I read this book, and Straussman volunteers were seeing the same clinical place with the same three short beings and then the tall, wispier being that was seemingly in charge. They're seeing the same thing. So it's cool that people are talking about DMT when in relation to the near-death experience, and specifically in my case, because the correlations are so strong. But it's a phenomenal thing to ponder, that you can actually cross over the veil, and we all do every night when we dream and soul travel. But that's something that's there, and it's something the shamans figured out. This is the ayahuasca group. The drinking ayahuasca is a self-inflicted near-death experience of sorts. It's the most remarkable piece of information that maybe the world's not ready for, but that this act of us dying is reenacted by the shamans. And if you become a really powerful at letting go, you can also do this on your own without any help. This is what we are. This is how powerful we are. We just don't know about it in these times. So that's my story, and that's my added bit of information for all the DMT experts out there, is that this is you're starting to understand that this is a very profound connection. And my near-death experience kind of is a bridge to something that's not believable. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching today's episode. Please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.